Well, I'm watching our time and it's flying by, and I've got to ask you about flying saucers, but I'm not gonna. We're gonna hold off on that for just a moment. I'm gonna ask you
Okay.
instead about being a sensitivity reader, because I know that that's a service that you provide, and I talk with editors on the show on a regular basis, so esteemed audience gets to enjoy recommendations for a sensitivity reader, and I can't let the opportunity pass since I'm talking to one available for hire. What services do you provide? Why would someone come to you needing a sensitivity reader? And yeah, what will they get from you?
Basically, I can read for an North Indian American first generation born perspective in a book. So if you have a character who is Indian American, I can give it a read and kind of give you notes on how that perspective is coming across. And I don't like to say specific books I've worked on because as a sensitivity reader, you can never, they don't have to take your advice. You're just giving advice. So it's not like you are like, do this, and then they do it and it's fixed. It's you're like, you could do this, and then they think about it, and then the writer and the editor will decide whether or not it makes sense. But it was just basically as a way to, because I also think that, like, I think the concept of diversity in kidlit is a big one, and it's not necessarily just going to be fixed by all of us getting to tell our own stories, which we should be able to tell our own stories, but also by making sure that worlds aren't just all looking one way. So if your book is set in a high school, like, it shouldn't just be one kind of kid who goes to that high school. And that takes some help from sensitivity readers, I think.
So, what are some examples of things that you've caught in the past? Generic. We won't talk about anybody specific, but what are some common things maybe that you've come across that readership or writers should be looking out for?
So one thing for Indian characters, especially like North Indian Hindu characters, are that names often matter. Again, this is all with the caveat that it is not a one size fits all, that this is a very like general thing, is that you can often tell where someone is from based on what their name is. Names have religious connotations, cultural connotations, and I find that's something that people don't necessarily realize. They also don't necessarily realize what it means to exist in this country when Asian people couldn't mass migrate until 1965, because that absolutely impacts what our communities look like and who got to come over and who had access to immigration to the United States. And so it's like historical and cultural things that may not even occur to the writer to think about when writing a character of Indian descent.
Preeti Chhibber, have you ever seen a flying saucer, and do you believe in them?
I have not, but I have no reason not to believe in them.
Oh, I will
There's so
also
little
accept ghosts if you've seen one of those.
I think there's so little we know about the universe that there's no reason to not believe these things exist. That said, I have not, to my knowledge, seen any. But who knows? Maybe they made me forget. I don't know.
Eventually, I haven't seen either, but eventually I'm going to see the ghost of an alien, and that's going to be an
Yep.
amazing night. And then my last question, because I want to get us out of here. I know that you told me earlier you hadn't had dinner yet, and it's just cruel to keep you talking if you haven't had a chance to eat. So we'll end on this. My last question is always some variation of, if there was some bit of advice that someone could have given you toward the beginning of your career, as many bits of advice as you like, that would have made a significant difference and might make things easier for the writers who are listening now, what would you go back and tell yourself?
I think believe in your own abilities, which is a very difficult thing to do, and don't be afraid to ask for what you want, because I think that's also a very difficult thing to remember, especially when you're a woman or a person of color. I think sometimes you are your own worst enemy. Like with the Spider-Man book where I was like, I can't write this book. Who am I to write this book? And I had to have a friend who was like, no, you can write this book. Say yes. Because I think sometimes we realize that often we have to be twice as good to get half as far. And it makes us anxious about our own abilities, but we should trust in them and don't be afraid to say yes.